Welcome everyone to part 2 of this epic build video. I am building a system, Micro-ATX, a little bit smaller than your full-size ATX systems. In this case, the Corsair 280X from their Crystal series, and I'm using Corsair's Hydro X custom water cooling line for making open loops that includes everything from radiators to pumps to blocks to fittings to basically everything you'd need to create an open loop. However, when I did part 1 of this video, I was missing a few things. For example, one of my radiators was just too big. This 360mm rad will not fit in that case, so I had to ask Corsair to send over another 240. And then I also just wanted to make sure that as we embark on the next phase of this, which is going to be to set up the actual water cooling loop, that we have all the parts that we might potentially need. So I've got some angled fittings, some adapters, a ball valve, other stuff like that that might be necessary in here. We got a few more of their hardline fittings, and this is just to make sure that I don't run out depending on how I run the loop. These come in sets of 4. They're called XF hardline. And of course, radiators. They sent 2 of them. I didn't really need 2, but cool, good to have extra.
Excellent!
Cooler Master's MK730 gaming mechanical keyboard is the more portable version of their flagship Master Key 750 and features the same premium brushed aluminum finished and floating key design as well as genuine Cherry MX switches in blue, brown, or red. Use the function keys for on-the-fly RGB LED control, admire the stylish bottom and side light bars, and feel the comfort of the removable wrist rest in a 10 keyless form factor that you can easily take on the go. It's got USB Type-C too, so click the sponsor link in the description for more.
So my next steps would be to get these radiators installed with the fans and figure out exactly how much additional space is going to be in there and start planning out where the tubing is going to go. But I wanted to make this build a little extra, add just a little bit more, and perhaps even make use of the fact that this is a Micro-ATX build, because Micro-ATX is kind of this in-between size and it doesn't always get a lot of love. I think that's why there weren't a whole lot of motherboard options for it. So my thought was, what better way to make use of that extra space in the expansion slot that's down there than by adding a really nice capture card. Corsair owns Elgato. Elgato makes the 4K60 Pro, which is what this is, and they actually have a newer version of this, which I believe they're going to be sending over. For today, I actually ripped this out of my streaming capture system over here so that I can get some test measurements on it. So this is going to be installed in the lowermost expansion slot down there, which actually does affect our cooling configuration a little bit because there is somewhat limited space in the bottom for radiator and fans. So I think I'm going to go with my original plan of just doing a couple intake fans at the bottom. That will give me enough space for the capture card above that, and then hopefully enough space on the right side to route the tubing out of the radiator and then over to the graphics card, then to the GPU, then to the upper radiator, and then completing the loop, getting things into the back with the pump and reservoir combo. And the pump and reservoir combo, fortunately, is fully functional because just recently actually used it and did some testing with it with the other build I'm working on in the Singularity Spectre 2.0 case, and it did a great job, so that's good. Now we get to actually install it, although it does have just a little bit of water in it still. To put finishing touches on a build like this, you're probably going to be interested in some sleeved cables, and that can often be an expense that jacks up the price of a build by $100 or $200 depending on the quality of the cables and if you get them custom done or not. Corsair actually sells this sleeved set of cables for a lot of their power supplies, compatible with actually a really wide range of Corsair power supplies. However, these unfortunately have a pretty significant amount of black heat shrink coming up off of the plugs, which isn't horrible looking, but I would say isn't the cleanest looking. And this kit does not come with a 24-pin extension for some inexplicable reason. You've got Molex plugs, you've got SATA plugs, you've got 6-pin and 8-pin PCI Express graphics. You've even got CPU plugs here, but no 24-pin cable. So to that end, I went with the recommendation that Kyle has used a couple times, which is Asia Horse, which you can order from Amazon. I needed something quick that would get here quickly, that is decent quality, and these I'm actually pretty impressed with so far. They come with little cable combs, so I've just been combing up the 8-pin and the 24-pin here. I want to get these plugged in and routed in the system because one thing I've definitely neglected in the past in a water-cooled build like this is I've gotten too set on all the water cooling stuff and radiators and fans and getting those positions and not realized, like, oh yeah, I still need to plug in like front panel connectors and stuff. So I'm going to take care of all that so it's done with, out of the way, and then we can do the stuff that's going to be in front of it. Getting the radiators installed, I completely brain farted on this one and I installed it backwards. The fittings are facing towards the front rather than facing towards the back. But what we're trying to figure out is if we're going to be able to fit any sort of intake fans down here. The Elgato capture card unfortunately is conflicting with this rear one. So unless I went with a slim fan, which I might be able to wedge under there, and I'm not sure if it would come in this finish and everything, can't fit a fan in the rear one, and we're going to stick with the Elgato 4K capture card. The front one here, there is enough space for right in front of that capture card, but then we run into conflicts with the front radiator, and I already mentioned in the first video why the connection points for the tubing need to be at the bottom for the front radiator, because if they're at the top, they would conflict with the top radiator. So that said, with this fan here, there's really not much space for the tubing to come out. I also need to pass the tubing back through this single gap back here, which is where the tubing going back to the pump res is gonna have to go, as well as coming back out the front for the rest of the loop. So I need to leave some space there. However, with this radiator flipped forward, now I'm thinking like, wait, could I somehow like kind of come around the corner here and still give myself a bit of extra space? I'm not sure, but let's give it a shot. Let's see what happens. So as expected with this build, I've had to dive into my collection of fittings and adapters and other accessories in order to work out some of the more complicated things that I'm trying to do with this build. So still seeing if I can fit an intake fan up here in the front. And as mentioned, if the fittings were coming this direction on this radiator and it was up in the front, that would definitely conflict with that and it just wouldn't fit. So accidentally mounted the radiator backwards. Then I looked and I was like, hey, maybe there's enough space there. Then I dug into my fittings and I found some barrel extenders and I found some 90-degree angled ones. These are actually some Alpha Cool fittings that Jay left with me many years ago. So whoever gets this build is going to get a couple OG Jay Alpha Cool fittings. These are actually a little bit wobbly, but they've never ever leaked, so that's good. We'll double check them for leaks before the system actually is up and running. But I believe, I hope that I can now kind of angle this in a little bit like that. And then once I mount that with the fans, this can be angled up, and there's a couple different routes I might go with that tube. And then the other side loops around there and pokes out right here, which is right where it should be. And then the last thing that I think is a major concern when it comes to getting all of the hardware installed here is going to be, again, just where this pump reservoir is going to go back here. And I've toyed around with different ideas of mounting it to the floor, looking at how much space I have with all the cable management area here. Fortunately, most of the power cables are already in here, so that's nice. But I think what I'm actually going to do is take this bracket that the pump comes with, that it kind of sits in and screws down to. It has 4 bracket mounting hole points right there, and I think I'm going to mount that to the front of the case. So I'm going to need to do a little bit of case modding, just drilling 4 holes from the front of the case to mount that properly. And then I'll need to have it sit up high enough that I can still access the inlets in the top for filling purposes. And then also that it's clear of that routing hole down at the bottom, so I can bring one of these out here for an inlet and then the other one back down for the outlet. So guys, in one of my recent videos, I mentioned that as I am approaching these more involved projects, the water-cooled ones that involved custom loops and everything, I'm trying to set limits for myself, which means that I'm gonna work on this project for a day, that's gonna be made into a video, and that's what I'm doing today. And at this point, I think we have just a little bit too much to do still to get this finished, so we're gonna be pushing it off to a part 3 video. So thank you for watching part 2 of this video. Coming at you real soon in part 3 is gonna be how the heck we figure out certain things like plugging in a USB 2.0 port to these front ports up here, which I forgot to do that, and we still need to add that on because we're gonna need to add this thing, the Corsair Commander Pro, which is gonna need to go in the back here. And as you can see, we still have a decent amount of space, but I have not yet mounted our pump and reservoir, and that is because although I'm pretty confident, 99% confident it's gonna just mount up to the front of the case here, I wanna punch a hole right up here. That's gonna be for one of the main tubing things to go out to the front of the case, and I want it out there for the aesthetic look of the tubing, so it's even on both sides. For that, we actually have a fill port here that Corsair also sent through, so we can use that on there, but I need to make sure there's enough clearance behind it for this pump and res to be mounted. And then for the tubing itself, I think I finally decided how I want it to look. It's gonna come out of that hole that I punch up here, come down at an angle and go into the inlet on the CPU block, come out of there and go up at hopefully about the same angle angle to get up to this top reservoir, come out of that and come down and then go at a 90-degree angle to get over here to the GPU, come out the top of the GPU and go at another 90-degree angle over to the other side of the case. Just gonna use these 90-degree angled fitting adapters for that to get it over here to this reservoir, and then I already showed you how it passes through that and goes back to the back of the case to get back to the pump reservoir combo, and then the loop continues. I don't think I can overstate just how tightly everything is fitting in this case. Fortunately, it's fitting, but oh so very tightly. For example, this top radiator here is only mounted with 6 screws here. The front 2 aren't lining up with the bracket, but it is still supported by the front radiator here because it's actually up against that. I had just enough room to put both radiators and the fans. And then of course I've decided to stick with this bottom intake fan. I posted a picture on Twitter and I've gotten a little bit of negative feedback about that, but I like having it there for a bit more airflow. It's also going to light up since it's an LL series fan, so that will provide a little bit more lighting at the bottom of the case as well, which I think will kind of balance it with the lighting at the top of the case. All that said though, part 3 is going to involve the running of the tubes, the setting up of the RGB, and then a fill and hopefully a powering on, and hopefully nothing catches on fire or otherwise goes wrong, because that would be very sad. I'm really liking how the system is turning out for now. Let me know what you guys think of it in the comment section down below, and hit the thumbs up button if you enjoyed this video. We'll be back with part 3 hopefully really soon. We'll see you guys in the next one.